All right, we are live here, episode 9 of 7 Day Worship.
Hi
Um,
guys.
just anybody who is watching this, just want to let you know this is super casual. This is not something that we care about too much when it comes to um, having people listen into what's going on and having people engage with us. And yeah, if you're watching this for the first time via LinkedIn or YouTube, just thank you so much for hopping on. We're going to be talking about church production today. So if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, throw them in the comments and we'll try to get to those. And if you don't and you watch us on the replay and you want to connect, then you can connect with us. Absolutely. We'll share different ways you can connect with each and every one of us here. Today, I am joined with Kris, my co-host, always. Not always. He wasn't here last week. He ditched me for Hawaii. But many times. And then I'm also joined here with Kevin Ferstl with Church Forward. Kevin, how are you doing today, man?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Casey, you cannot say we're talking about church production without having some bump music.
I'm still waiting on you to provide that. You know?
We were all thinking it.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, we probably have enough talent here to do some kind of beatboxing remix if we wanted to. So, but yeah, we're going to be talking about that. First, we're going to talk to Kevin and just hear a little bit more about his story. And so let's just dive into that. Kevin, we're just going to talk as if we're at a coffee house and just meeting for the first time, even though you and I know each other decently well at this point. But yeah, let's just have that initial conversation. And at some point here, just heads up, Kris might be taking off. He is in transit. And so we'll make sure he says goodbye before he leaves and interrupts us in a polite way to say goodbye. So, all right, Kevin, you want to tell us a little bit about your story, your background, and how you got into ministry? Just kind of give us a little overview.
Yeah, I'll give you a whistle-stop tour of my ministry years. A lot of it has been just as a faithful volunteer that loves his church and is trying to use it in any way for God's glory in any way possible. It was about 15 years ago, after being a faithful volunteer serving in local church while pursuing more marketplace-minded ministry. I worked for Eddie Bauer for a number of years, doing store visuals, things like that. Kris and I were talking. I was listening to him share about his love for Seattle, and I certainly thought Seattle was in my future as well. Definitely have a passion for the Northwest. So while serving as a faithful volunteer and getting married at an avenue of change, my wife and I had been praying, and it's kind of funny. In my youth and naivety, I at many points, because music has always been something very personal and something I've been very passionate about. Generally in the performance mindset, I went to school to study Broadway or music theater and thought that's what I would end up doing. So if I talk with my hands a lot, y'all just forgive me. But at that point, we were at a junction point where we were trying to figure out, God was prompting us that something was coming. And as we prayed and tried to be faithful stewards of that feeling that we were both having, we both felt pretty united in the fact that now was our time for that. God was asking us to take a leap of faith and take a step into ministry from a vocational standpoint as a primary focus of both our lives and our work. And it's funny, I mentioned in my youth and naivety, at several times in my life, I felt like God had potentially been calling me. But oftentimes I shrugged it off, thinking that was the easy thing, right? Well, music is the thing that I'm good at. So that would be the easy way out, which is so funny to think about and reflect on now, because you guys know ministry is anything but easy, right? So after that, we spent about 12 years in local church ministry before having the opportunity to step forward about 4.5 years ago. I'm a part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and I serve our state convention of Kansas and Nebraska. So we're 2 states combined. We're known as Church Forward. We went through a rebrand about 4.5 years ago, and had the opportunity to come alongside actually my music minister from when I was a kid, the church I grew up in, who happened to be a life and ministry mentor of mine by that point, 30 plus years. And so I knew I didn't have much time, but I knew I had the opportunity, and God pretty much affirmed by the time I walked out of that lunch in my heart that we were going to move. We're a family of 6, and it was time for us to move, and it was time for me to take a transition and function as an encourager and equiper for 430 plus churches spread out over 15 hours, and a lot of remote rural ministry. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Kris, I'm going to let you ask any questions before you have to go, so you can just get one of those hurrahs in here, because I'm going to have Kevin for the rest of the night, and we're going to geek out. So, what thoughts do you have?
So describe. I mean, I grew up in denominations, but describe what that. It doesn't sound like you're working for one church, but like a network. Like, so what is kind of like your day to day, week to week look like?
Yeah. So the way a state convention functions, because the Southern Baptist Convention is actually kind of pretty confusing in and of itself, simplistic in ideology. It is a group of cooperating churches. So there's 430 churches that are a part of the Church Forward Network. And really, it's about cooperative giving through the cooperative program for international missions, seminaries, which we have a seminary here in Kansas City, one of our 6 Southern Baptist seminaries, which is pretty exciting to have those guys so close. Gosh, that's a great question, Kris. If I had to describe my job, it's actually pretty hard to describe now that I'm thinking about it, because it really is everything. It's amazing as a guy that's always prided himself on output, in whether that be in a local church setting or really in any avenue of life. uh, I have had in 4.5 years had to reshape what success looks like from the state of from the viewpoint of my job and my role, because I might reach the end of the day. Today's a great example. I started this morning by doing some follow up text messages with a few worship leaders. There's one here in my local city that is starting in June, moving from North Carolina into a new role. And he's going to be here this weekend. So I was texting with him, making sure his hotel stuff was covered and seeing if he had any questions about coming in, or if any hopes or dreams, or if we could meet for coffee, or I'm going to take him to a Sporting Kansas City game on Saturday, just to welcome him to the city. And then I spent the last 2.5 hours of my day in a one-on-one mentor conversation with a young worship leader that was born out of the church that I'm a part of, that I lead worship at, who has felt God's call to step into a newest church plant that we planted in January as their worship leader. So we're talking about her transition and what that looks like as a young 22-year-old stepping into a leadership position in a newly launched church plan, and how do you onboard and all sorts of stuff. So that's what a day looks like. Sometimes I walk away saying, well, I haven't produced anything. But really what I do is just try to be the hype man for all of our worship leaders, because we know they could use some love.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, there's 400 plus churches in your network, which means there's at least 400 individuals, up to 800 if there was 2 in a larger church. But some of the churches you were talking about earlier are very small, so it's probably even 1 volunteer. But like, if it's you're kind of helping develop what some would what you know it's easy to say when we say the word worship in church, it's easy for people to think music.
Mhm.
And so it's like it would be people that are trying to facilitate worship or worship through music in 400 plus churches, which, so in a way you're resourcing, supporting at least 400 to 600 leaders probably, right?
Yeah. Sadly, probably on the lower number, the lower end of
Yeah.
those numbers. I wish it was 600. And and as we were talking about before, Casey hit record, that we have, I mean, for example, we have churches that are incredibly robust, that are large metro churches, for example, in the Kansas City area, that have might have many paid staff. They might have a band that's paid as well. But at the same point, I can tell you 8.5 hours from where I'm at in Valentine, Nebraska, there is a worship leader who is a 24-year-old female named Doretta who serves at First Baptist Valentine, and they do what we lovingly call karaoke worship. And they sing along to canned music or, some sort of visual presentation of lyrics, right? But what matters is discipling your congregation, right? Giving them the language and the words and the ways to respond to God's goodness for who He is and what He's done. And that doesn't matter if you have a 100-piece orchestra or it's just pulling up a YouTube video, which I do not condone. Let me just look right in the cameras. Don't pull up your YouTube videos. There's other things. Reach out to me. I'll give you some good resources. Anyway, but that's just the diversity of what we deal with
Oh,
in our two states.
oh man, we have so much topic here, Casey. Rather than me asking questions, I'm just like, if you're regularly talking, how many years have you been in this position? You said,
4.5.
um, so you're regularly talking to 400 plus churches. You're seeing the good, bad, and ugly, for lack of a better description. And thank you for caring enough to be in this position, because how churches worship matters. How the body of Christ worships matters. And as we talk about a lot on this, it comes back to theology. And what is our theology? How do we, I'll butcher a Tozer quote, but basically, we can demean God and demean His holiness by the way we think about Him, and we do that really bad when we think about Him like He's a human, like He's us. And
Yeah.
so seeing all these things, like what's something super encouraging that you see, and then cutting to the chase of church production and what we're talking about, like what is, if you're screaming on the inside because of a repeated pattern you see over and over, and a repeated conversation you have over and over, what is it, and how do we need the Lord's
Mm.
mercy to help, or
Yeah.
where do we need the Lord's
Those are,
intervention in the church today?
yeah, gosh, those are both really good questions. Something that encourages me every single day. One of my favorite things, and just even a personal heart song of mine, is seeing how churches are reaching a point where they might have been without a worship leader for so long, years. We have church. There's a church 35 minutes up the road from where I'm at that has been without a primary worship leader for 9 years, and it's just volunteers, and it's very lean, and their volunteers are doing their best to love their church and to serve well. But what you see is just a huge gap. And for to go back historically, at least in the Southern Baptist Convention, because that's where pretty much all of my years of both ministry and church membership and attendance from 9 months before I was born have all been a part of. And back when we were singing, every church was singing out of the current hymnal, right? What you found is there was very much so a direct path to ministry. You would go, if you felt called or were called out, you were then immediately sent or suggested to go to, for us locally here, this would be like to go to Oklahoma Baptist University and get your degree in choral conducting. And then after that, you would go to one of our 6 Southern Baptist seminaries and you would get your degree or your MDiv, or, master's in theology or something like that. And then they would kind of say, okay, now here's your church, right? Here's, you just pray about it and go. Because there was so much, I say unity in an optimistic way of how we did worship. Every church had a pianist and an organist, right? But there was also a bit of a system that was working to champion these worship leaders and also kind of generate, right? Called a factory, right? There was kind of a factory mentality of how that's done. That's not bad. That's just how we had such a plethora, right? And we were in the heyday where America was still, predominantly believers and all those kinds of things. But the result now is you've got churches that don't have discipleship pipelines. They've not discipled any young leaders. They've not offered any opportunities for young leaders because there has been this performance or professionalism mentality that's been applied to what our music looks like. Well, the beautiful thing is now we're at a point where the need is so great that even the most ardent uh, resistors of accepting and realizing the true reality where we are is that the person who's going to step in and be your worship leader is probably in your youth group right now, right? And it's our job to help disciple and champion them, and that becomes a ministry and a heartbeat of the church in and of itself, right? That we can see that champion. So what encourages me is that we're starting to see churches that are providing opportunities for what I like to call emerging leaders, because it's really devoid of age, but just emerging leaders. Churches are finally realizing that, hey, this guy that we haven't really poured into that's been leading for 5 or 6 years, yeah, he's probably our guy. And so the beauty of that is now they start switching their posture to saying, okay, well, how do I care for them? And then it's helping that worship leader come alongside and realize that, okay, the fact that I said yes because I didn't want to see my worship ministry at my church fail because I love my church, that is also responding to God's call. It's not some crazy cloud parting moment, but you are responding. You are being obedient to God's call in your life. So I love that. I'm very encouraged by our collegiate ministries. If there's revival happening in the world, it's happening through our college campuses. Completely convinced of that. And then something I would say that's, man, if I could say one that is just consistent, kind of it is operating from the mindset, even in production, that the primary worship or the primary instrument in worship is our voices singing together. It's not the lead electric guitar line. It's not the drums. It's not any synths. It's none of that. Having that mindset changes things.
So you're saying, you say that one more time. You're saying the
Yeah.
vocals are absolutely important more than the other things, but places aren't understanding
Yeah.
that.
It's the voice of the congregation. God has called us together in gathered corporate worship to give him praise, to respond to his goodness, right? To testify of his good works to one another. And oftentimes a common thing is going into churches and the music is, I sound like such an old person saying this, but the music is too loud. And sometimes that's actually just really a mix issue. That's not a too loud. But it's kind of interesting. There was a research project done about a year ago by a former professor at Southern Seminary, and he ended up surveying nationwide individuals through social media about about singing in church. And it was really fascinating. If you pulled up the top 10, which I can pull this up if we want at some point, but the top 10, when they surveyed and collated the top 10 reasons why people aren't singing in church, it's kind of funny because on that top 10 list, one of them is the music is too soft and one of them is the music is too loud. So I think it actually speaks more to the fact that
And Baby
finding what
Bear's
is
mix was just right.
exactly. Yeah. No, that's it. That's for sure. And I just think it speaks to understanding one of my favorite phrases as a worship leader is you've got to be a ruthless editor for your context. And that may be the volume of the room, that may be the mix in the house, that may be the songs that you sing, the keys that you sing them in, right? All those different variables. When you operate
Who,
from a mindset of leading transformational worship, it actually starts with how do you serve your church, right? So I would say that one of the things that, it's funny, if you surveyed worship leaders, I would venture to guess about what is the most encouraging thing to experience as a worship leader. They probably say when the congregation sings so loud I can hear it. And so maybe at some point we've got to ask the question is, are we contributing negatively or poorly to that?
yeah,
Right? If
that's a
they're
great.
singing, is is the music too loud that I can't even hear it? Right? And that's not necessarily getting down to like, well, do I have the house mics in my, properly set in my mix on my ears? No, that doesn't really apply, right? But can they hear one another too? I think is pretty important.
I can't wait to keep jumping into this. I feel like we're skipping the interview altogether here, which is awesome.
Sorry
And that's
about
why I
that.
asked you to. No, that's why I asked you to come on.
Yeah.
And I know that Chris needs to talk about some of the stuff before he has to jump off. And so, Chris, I'm going to let you keep going down this rabbit trail though before you got to go, because I know you've got a lot. And we're going to definitely talk more about this on a different episode and keep geeking out about this stuff. I got some more guys for church production to hop in as well. And Kevin, we'll have to have you back on as well when we do that one. But keep going, Chris.
For sure.
Yeah. There's here. I wanna see if we can pray for a minute, because I'm thinking of so many things we could talk about. Like, this could be a 4-hour conversation, but Lord, just give us clarity right now where you want to go tonight. Thank you for this time together. It's so encouraging to see and feel kindred hearts with people that want to serve and bless your name through music. So give us wisdom and direct this conversation tonight. We praise you. Amen. Uh, yeah, thank you. I think that was a good what you said about if you had like congregants and they had an exit poll survey and they walked out, and there's to be so many ways to frame the question, but if you said, or a worship leader from the stage, a band leader from the stage, or a musical director. Let me, the movie, be specific, Bob, right? What about Bob? Like,
Yeah.
what was the, by whatever measure you would call success, what would they say? And you said, from a band leader, someone looking out, it would be like everyone was singing and participating. You could probably broaden it. Or they were raising their hands, or they were clapping, or I saw some people dancing, or smiles on their face. And then if congregants were walking out and you had an exit poll survey, how did you feel like the Lord was moving, or whatever you said to them? They're like, oh, I could really hear and sing, and I just felt like we were all one.
Yeah.
I never thought about it from that angle of, or that
Hmm.
perspective of, what would people perceive. I have a running commentary going when I preach or teach about, we have a tendency to leave. We go to church with a 5-star Yelp mentality, and our after
Yeah.
church lunches and things like, this was pretty good. Oh, the sermon, I give it 2-star.
Mm.
I would have given it 3-star except for the passage on, I don't really, or I didn't like the songs, like,
Yeah.
which is really saying, it's like we're treating a church attendance like going to a restaurant or a coffee shop, meaning
Hmm.
consumer. We're so used to critiquing or saying I like this, but I didn't like this, but so here's the negative aspect, and I'm going to throw it back to you, of asking someone, how did you feel? People, why did it go good today? Well, does that necessarily mean the Lord was honored because everyone felt good about the song, or everyone felt good enough about the song to sing the words? Right? Because we
Yeah.
weren't singing the song of Deborah, singing about putting a tent stake through the enemy's head. And if we were, which would be a
Yeah.
biblical song, how uncomfortable would the people go? So when they left the exit poll, they would say, one
Yeah.
star review, because that
Oh.
song may be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It
That's so
was
true.
too loud. It was too loud. Do you know what 2 million tambourines by the women of Israel sounded like after they crossed the Red Sea? You know how freaking loud that was?
Yeah.
So I go to, like, there's definitely a cultural, and cultural would be if you're a West Coast Baptist or Southern Baptist or Pentecostal. There's definitely a cultural what would be appropriate
For
for a
sure.
mix. And I was just, you kicked that off when thinking, like, if you had an exit poll, and what do, what is what is the worship leader's, maybe this is it, what is the worship leader's role to design something where people feel like they can participate even if it would be
Yeah.
different at a church 5 miles up the road because it's a different culture.
Hmm. Yeah.
I've said
That's a
enough.
good word. Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, it's Chris, that's a good word for sure. I mean that context matters. That's some of the beauty and most frustrating part of being a worship leader in 2026 is that the church down the road values different songs differently. I mean, even that conversation of should we sing songs from controversial sources or, I think what I would love to do, you talk about exit polls, like the question I would love to, if we were going to exit poll church members at the end of a Sunday is, what did the songs teach you about God today? Like, did you learn anything? Did you like, that's my question because really um, a kind of a bell ringing question that I like to hit worship leaders with is if all that the people have had, if all that the people of God had to know of his goodness were the songs we sang on Sunday, what did you teach them?
Yeah. Or if I could broaden it, how did it
Yeah.
enlarge their heart or heart posture towards the
Yeah,
Lord?
for sure. Yep.
And then if I highlight one thing you did say that was really good though too, you said you're really serving the body,
Yeah.
and that would take discernment and a relationship with the Lord to know what am I called to serve, which is usually always, most of the times, going to be a letting go or a laying down of what you want or
For
what your
sure.
preferences might be to serve, right?
Yeah. Well, no, that's it. I mean, I would argue that being an effective worship leader is actually probably 80 to 85% about what happens off the platform than what happens on. I think your ability
Totally,
to
totally.
relate, and yeah. So I mean, so talking about excellence in production ministry or ministry mindset through production is really more talking about the finite like 15% of ministry, right? Because if you're um, we of course being in the Kansas City area, the Chiefs are a huge thing. So I use this Chiefs example all the time that you might be an ardent Chiefs fan and you know Patrick Mahomes and you know everything there is to know about Patrick Mahomes and his statistics and his background, where he grew up, his passing percentages, all these different kinds of things. And when you watch as a fan, right? When you watch the game as a fan, say he starts making really poor decisions on the line, right? Suddenly, like you're like, okay, I'll let one or two of these go, and then you start getting frustrated, and then you might even turn on him. Eventually, you reach a certain point where you're like, come on, stop making these stupid mistakes, right? Stop doing this again. So take that, capture it, back up, and look at it from the viewpoint of what if you and Patrick grew up together and you were watching Patrick Mahomes, you were watching him on um, you guys grew up together and you're there watching and makes those same poor decisions. Like how quick are you to criticize? How slow are you to criticize? How likely are you to show support regardless, unwavering support? And when you look at that as a measurement tool, I think there's some validity in looking at that as a worship leader. I've always said that God has called me to shepherd and encourage people through the method of music. The gift he gave me was music, but really he's just called me to love people and help people love him more. That's my call. He's just given me the method of music or the skill set in order to do that through music primarily, right? So when your congregation, touching on the consumer mentality, right? When the congregation's looking at you or your volunteers on the platform on a Sunday morning, are they seeing it from a fan perspective or are they seeing it from their lifelong friend perspective? And really,
Oh
as a
man,
worship leader, that's on you, right? That's on you, the leader, to cultivate those
say
relationships.
say that
And it's
say that
amazing.
say that one more time. That was very good. I
Well,
gotta process it.
when your congregation is sitting like out there on Sunday morning, when they look at you, are they seeing, if I use my own name as an example, are they seeing that guy that sings on Sunday, Kevin, or are they seeing their friend Kevin? Um, I think the best, not that I've been doing this a bajillion years, but I think the best compliment in ministry that I've ever been given was by my dear friend Marion Moncrief. He passed away several years ago. He was a senior adult in the church that I served at in Wichita, Kansas, where I spent my longest season of ministry up to this point, serving. And Marion was a nice guy, but he definitely would let you know on occasion on Sundays. You could kind of pick up that he wasn't happy with what I picked, what songs I picked, or the ratio of hymns to whatever. And yeah, he was always kind of in the middle. So I asked him, I said, Marion, why don't you, I know on Tuesdays you go visit, every Tuesday you go visit your doctor and you drive home. Well, I know you drive right by the church, so why don't you stop by after your doctor's appointment on Tuesdays and have a cup of coffee with me? So we would sit and we'd have a cup of Keurig coffee, and we did that for months. And I remember we got to know each other, found out we were both Oklahoma State University grads. We both have a lot of fun memories of seeing Stillwater grow up, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember we were laughing probably about some story. We've got 4 kids, so there's always, we had, I guess, 3 at the time, but there's always hilarious stories happening at our house. And we were laughing about something. And I remember at the end, as we trailed off on laughter, he said, "Boy, Kevin, I sure wish I liked your music as much as I like you." And honestly, that is still to this day the best
man.
ministry compliment that I've ever been given. But that speaks to it. And you know what's crazy? There's a direct correlation with the amount of time Marion Moncrief and I, as our friendship grew, his support grew, his criticism wavered, right? And I think there's very much so that's just such a vital part of it. So I think what happens off platform, I can't pound that nail enough. What happens off the platform is way more important than you picking a great song set for a Sunday or hitting some awesome, overlapping transition between 2 songs, right? And I think it's why young, or I guess probably I shouldn't say young, inexperienced worship leaders, why they're always blown away by Sundays, like we just talked about, when they're like, man, I heard the congregation sing so loud, or why can't I get the congregation to sing, to sing some of the modern worship songs as loud as they sing hymns, right? And that's a whole nother, man, I won't even kick that horse, because that horse will start running and it's hard to stop it once it runs. But I think that there's a lot of variables that play into that, but I think that's a totally relevant question to ask. And I think in the world of production, your overall sound to congregation balance matters, especially depending on your context.
Yeah. No, that's great. Kevin, I ask everybody this as we wind down this portion, we get into the roundtable. So I'm just going to ask you this one time. What would you say to those volunteer or, try worship pastors, worship leaders out there who are just vocationally struggling to figure out how to get everything done, but more importantly, how to do what you just said, which is 80% off the platform? Like, what would you say to them about how they could keep God elevated in their everyday life, and just encourage them with that? And then we'll, after that response, we'll go ahead and get into our roundtable here and let other people in.
Yeah. Gosh, I would start with Colossians 3:23, work heartily as for the Lord and not for man. Wake up every day with a countdown timer, thinking that's one less day. I don't know how long God will have me on this earth, but every day is one less day that I have to serve him. And I think for a lot of our volunteer leaders, it's hard to just feel like you're taking ground. You just live in survival mode. Sunday is funny. It's the weirdest thing. It comes every 7 days, and it, without fail, it happens every single week. I don't understand it. It's some weird interstellar time vortex that we live in or something. I don't know. But, I would just say, like, what you do matters. It is incredibly important at any level that you're serving. Right. But in the end, the Lord provides, but he also expects wisdom and hustle. And it's just that simple. God will provide, he will bring the harvest, but you've got to plant. You've got to plant. If you want to improve the situation, if you want more volunteers, if you're trying to get your congregation to, there's too much holiness that is being used to masquerade passivity. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think it's easy to just be passive. Like if you need a drummer, to just sit there and say, well, I'm just going to pray about it. I'm just going to pray about it.
No
The
one
Lord will
needs drummer,
provide that.
Kevin.
yeah, yeah, right. Spoken from the chorus itself. But oh my gosh, yeah, it's just hard to, it is like ministry is challenging, but God has called you to lead, so lead, right? It's both harder than you think and easier than you think to do it, right? And Casey, I think about in answering your question, like the practical, because I'm a really practical person. So the practical side of me is like our friendship kicked off and blossomed because we both unlocked this idea about the fact that at that point, 2.5 years into my ministry at our state convention, I had spent more time teaching worship leaders basic time management than theology. And it's not because they didn't care about theology, but it's because they only have 5 or 6 hours a week, maybe, to devote outside of their family, outside of their full-time job. And they just need a system, right? They just need a system to be able to step into, whether it's a mock schedule, whether it's, so it's not about do our worship leaders care about theology? It's how do we help them unlock a little bit of time so they can truly care about the theology of the songs that they're picking, or being a ruthless editor for your context, or serving your church off the platform, right? It's a hard challenge. It can be a tough nut to crack. I don't want to sound like I'm sugarcoating or making it easier than it is, but um, it's just yeah. I mean, it's the Lord provides. He will give you what you need, but you can't just sit on your hands and not do anything about it. If he's called you, you've got to respond to that call.
I keep thinking of this as you're talking, and I've never thought about it, but so much agricultural stories and references in scripture, just even planting and reap. But agriculture, the work of a farmer or the planter, it was all seasons,
Yeah.
and somehow it's still related to my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, always planting, always reaping, always thinking about the next season. That's what a farmer's doing, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's tilling the soil, preparing the soil, preparing the ground, all those different things, right? He's doing all of that. So he's living out the reality. You've got to do it no matter what in order to get the harvest at some point in the future. But it also involves a modicum of faith. It also involves trust that the rain is going to come when it should. Trust that your soil's going to produce. Trust in all those. And I think there's a beautiful. I think that's the reason Scripture leans into um, that type of cultivating storytelling so much in Scripture, is because it requires a both and, right, between faith but also work, right, hustle, right, momentum, non-passivity, right, you could just say action, right. And that's where I love, we even made for the worship collective, so for our worship leaders we have a thing called the worship collective, and it's just meant to be kind of a fun rally point for worship leaders across Kansas and Nebraska. It's the Church Forward Worship Collective is what we call it. But we have a sticker that is always the number one sticker that people take, and it says wisdom and hustle. And it's always the first one people gravitate to, or the ones that I see on water bottles. I can't show you, it's on my laptop right now too, but it's always the first one that people grab. And I think it's because again, you often think about, man, I'm going to pray about it. And prayer isn't how you start the work. Prayer is the work, right? But at the same point, God doesn't call you to sit on your hands and just wait.
Yeah. That's great. I swear, as we transition over, I did not tell Kevin to plug this in any way, but I like to transition with kind of something in between so we can cut. I'm going to head over to the wide shot here. I don't have my wonderful producer, Noella, here to do all the things for me, so I'm going to get people in here. At the same time, I'm going to share a little plug on something. But I am going to share the win the week stuff that Kevin and I really developed through the prompting of, hey, what do your people really need, Kevin? Was when I asked that question, he was like, man, I just spent so much time teaching systems and all that. And so I put together something. So if anybody wants to have this resource for free, just throw win the week in the comments. And I'm going to go ahead and get you guys this resource for you, just a PDF download with a PDF that actually gives the explanation of how to use this for you to just have a weekly tracker. And really, this is as basic as it needs to get, guys. In order to make Sunday happen, I promise you, you need 5 hours or less to make that grind continue. You need to pray, you need to plan, and then you need to prepare. So you need to do that hustle that Kevin's talking about. But you also need to do things like checking in with the Lord for yourself. You need to check in with your leadership, and you need to check in with your teams, even if that's your brothers and sisters at a very small church. That's how that needs to go. And then you make notes to yourself, what went well, what didn't go well, and you try to refine that for the next week. But yeah, anybody who wants to check that out, just let me know, and we could talk more. But put win the week in, and we'll go ahead and get you that resource. All right, now let me get.
Bro, where's your QR code? Come on. QR code and a bump music.
I'm not that prepared.
I gotta scan something here. Right?
Let's get the QR code.
All right. Patiently waiting in the wings, we have Greg Allen here, and we have Deanna. Greg, you want to just give a quick little intro of who you are, what do you do, sir? And Deanna, we'll have you go next. Then we'll go ahead and hop into the group discussion here.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. Hey, I'm Greg Allen. I'm the president of a company called Shepherd Staff. We work with churches and organizations across the country and helping them staff, mostly in the nonprofit sector. I live in Texas. Yeah, that's kind of me. What else would you like me to say?
We'll get to a lot of stuff, Greg.
Okay.
I'm not too worried about it. And we're going to have to interview you at some point as well. So, Deanna, you want to give us a quick little who are you, what are you doing right now kind of thing?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we got you.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm Deanna. I'm currently based out of Fort Worth, Texas, and I've been leading worship since I was 12. So everything you said about all of yeah, totally, all of that stuff. I 100% agree. So I've been leading worship for over 15 years now, and I currently teach a lot of kids music, and I have a voice training company for worship leaders called Voice Activated.
Love it. Thank you so much. All right. Well, let's go ahead and hop into this, guys. I'm just going to break this down because none of you have really been to one of these before. But the round table, think of it as just in life group. We can talk over each other. We can just hash things out. You can disagree and disagree to disagree, all the things. Let's not worry about this being streamed and other people looking at it. Just feel free to get these things out there. If you have scripture to share, share it. But we might hop into some interesting territory here because we're going to talk about church production. And my big question, as we kind of start off, I'm going to have us look at a few guiding scriptural passages that kind of give some insight on this as we get into it. But my main question is church production stealing the show, as it were? And so on Sunday, is church production stealing the show from people doing ministry the way that God wanted them to, from the way that people view going to church and the purpose of going to church if they're a congregant? Is it stealing the show for people understanding what their purpose is outside of the church as much as it is inside of the church? What priority are we putting into the production that we produce on Sunday morning versus the rest of the week? And is there something that needs to be done about that? So that's kind of my main premise as we get into that. And we'll talk, we can totally go off into, Disneyland of opportunities of conversations with that. But here's some guiding passages that I have for us. Feel free to use these. Feel free to use your own as we go in. But just to get our heads kind of wrapped into a singular point here. Exodus 3, this is Bezalel and the craftsmanship. This is actually the first guy who received the Holy Spirit to do something. It's pretty awesome in this passage. But having this passage in here to say, I filled him with the Spirit of God, with ability and intelligence and knowledge and all craftsmanship. And I think of all the Psalms that go over doing things with excellence and unto the Lord and just pouring yourself into it. And there's so much there for why we do produce at a high level or at the best that we possibly can when we're filled with the Spirit to produce excellence in all craftsmanship that we're a part of. And music is absolutely part of that. The Sunday sermon is part of that. And how we craft the service around the people that have unique situations in life is around that as well. And so I love that passage. 1 Corinthians 14:40, but all things should be done decently and in order. And people use this one. I'm using these as little sound bites because that's how they're always used for me whenever I'm confronted by people in the congregation. I'm sure you guys have experienced that as well. So I'm doing the bumper sticker version for a reason instead of the contextual
You're not taking
version.
them out of context, though. If you're going to use that as a church member, what do you got to take?
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, we can absolutely go into the context and all that as well. But then we got Colossians 3:23. People do this all the time as well. Say, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. And I think there's something even within that little soundbite that we can have fun discussing. But first question for the day, let's just kind of hop into this idea of volunteer or very part-time people who are in the ministry. What should their heart posture be? What should their mentality be towards making Sunday happen versus their other responsibilities in the church? So what do you guys think about that? What should that heart posture be as they enter in, say they're just starting or they're trying to refocus their life and figure out what is at the highest? And then how do I get into production? Where is production in that priority system? And how should I treat that mentally and spiritually? What do you guys think?
You're going to have to call on somebody.
I think Kevin's not saying anything because he talked for so long. So
I'm trying not to answer. Yeah.
I will let you answer first, and we'll bounce off of you, man, because I know you got thoughts on this.
Oh gosh. Well, I think so much is about understanding your congregation and your context. I mean, we unpacked that a little bit earlier. So I think for every church, where the production side of what you're doing, where that falls, again, everyone from a karaoke style worship, right, in a small town in 8.5 hours in Western Nebraska to a large church in Metro Kansas City. Those are just going to look very different. I think the heart posture behind it is it falls where it best serves the church, right? Really, mostly to eliminate distraction, because sound matters. We just talked about that, right? That's a part of production. Choosing your overall volume of the worship team, or the video, that you might be playing if that's all that you have, and I think those impact. So I think it needs to influence the heart of worship, which is helping people respond to God's goodness, and wherever that falls in your overall hierarchy may be addressed by your technology limitations or your technology abilities, right? Anywhere within there, but it needs to always take its rightful place in serving the vision and the purpose of why we gather together in corporate worship.
You think people struggle with this idea of, I have to hit a certain point for people to come to my church and experience worship in a high quality way? I guess by this, if you've led worship for a while, in a church plant versus a medium size or a large church. It's a different mentality for the worship leader. It feels like when you look at the church next door who is booming and you're wondering, how do we get there? And part of that production piece is, what equipment do I need in order to facilitate something a little bit more high quality? What type of music should we be playing and singing to attract younger people or families? What are the experiences that we're trying to give? And it becomes maybe formulaic in sorts of, they got there because of ABC, therefore if I produce ABC, we should be able to produce similar results. And I don't know, like, do you think that has anything to do with it? Like comparison and competition?
Yes. I think it's awfully hard and takes a lot of work not to fall into that in our culture. And I live in Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. There's all kinds of great production everywhere you go. So when there's not, it sort of stands out. I did this bivocationally for 20 years, responsible for our church's worship, right, while doing my thing. And I know I got caught up in that for a time, always with this, we can't get done what we want to, we can't grow like we want to because we're limited by this production element or this or that. And I'm older now. That was 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And now I would say I'd pretty much reject that kind of thinking and think, what do they say, comparison's the thief of joy or something along those lines. But it's awfully hard not to, in the way the system is set up, in what, I've been scrolling Instagram this afternoon, and all the churches are putting out there 3 weeks before Easter, pastor comes out and makes his thing, and then they show some live shots of the service, and they all look exactly the same. And that kind of stuff, and I get Easter's a big deal in Christian churches, but that kind of stuff, you see stuff like that on the internet or on social media, and it more often than not just breeds this, I'm not enough in what I do, or they're doing it better. And I really don't like that kind of stuff. But that's where I was 30 years ago doing this too, when arguably it was a lot simpler than it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I think
that's
not
good.
enough is a good way of saying that. Yeah. Because then you ask yourself, well, or you kind of go through the mindset of, well, I'm wearing multiple hats, I'm doing like this and this and this, and I'm not that great at this thing, but I'm still having to devote so much time to that. And even if you're trying to pursue excellence, depending on the type of church you're in, if you're bivocational, volunteer, or you're just slammed with 3 different positions vocationally, working 40 hours, it's like, who am I serving anymore? Kind of becomes the question, like, what is my purpose doing ministry? I'm so happy I didn't graduate from college with a ministry degree, because it was just thrown into the deep end, and having to figure it out without any formal training or expectation of, here's how you do it. And I think that freedom of being able to experiment with things that other people weren't learning, they were learning other habits. It helped me to remember always that discipleship and relationship was more important than Sunday. And Sunday could do fine if a couple hours was all it took to make it happen. That was like celebration day, and halftime. It wasn't what I was there for. And I didn't always keep sight on that. I often got pulled into what you're talking about too, Greg, where it was, that trap is sneaky. It gets you where you think that you're the strongest is where it starts reining in. And for me, it was with trying to pursue excellence. And then it's like, but you're not really excellent at this. They're excellent next door at this. And so how are they excellent? And you try to make sure that you follow those patterns and all of that. It's a really insidious thing. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I guess when we're talking about that, a burnout is something that happens pretty quickly, right? So like there's how many have you guys in I'm curious in like the educational space when people are preparing for ministry, do they still use that analogy of look to your right, look to your left, both of them are going to be gone in the next like 5 years or whatever? Do they still do that dramatic thing, or they do? Okay.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, because I mean I got that hit too and I was like, well, that's garbage.
Because
Like,
it's
why would...
still true though. Like that's the thing. It's still true.
Yeah.
Right. That's like it's sad and also crazy, but it's like a good dad joke. It never ages. It's just
Mhm.
always painful no matter when you hear it.
Dad joke, painful whenever.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, what do you guys think about this idea then of, I mean, you were talking about it, Kevin. I think that Greg has a very similar stance on this. The people you're looking for probably aren't necessarily in seminary. They're probably, and Deanna, I mean, you're part of this too. They're probably in your youth group. They're probably right on the seat in your church. Maybe that is one of the reasons why we're experiencing a lot of burnout, because we're not going from within the community with people who love the community and grew up in the community. I don't know. You guys got thoughts on that? Why we experience burnout and all that?
Yeah. I'll be the first. I'll not let any not
You
let
just
any
keep
dead
going,
air.
man. Yeah.
No, I mean, Greg, you and I are probably going to think exactly the same on this, I imagine. But I think it's burnout is, I think, a symptom of the dream chasing, like we were just discussing, right? Because you're uh yeah, it just comes back to, we talked about this a little bit ago, being a ruthless editor for your context. That may be in the songs you sing, the keys you do them, how many instrumental breaks you need in a song for your context, but it also comes down to just doing things in a sustainable way that fits your reality, right? That's where I think the chasing the performative side of excellence is such a dangerous trap, because for most worship leaders, especially if you're a volunteer in your church and you don't maybe have musical training, you learned how to play the guitar on YouTube, and you're not going to be able to have a 20-minute conversation about circle of fifths, right? No, you just need to know what songs to sing or in the right keys and things like that. But it's also understanding, like, um I, one of my favorite visuals is when you think about how rivers across the entire U.S., like the entire river system, works across in all of like North America. And what you have is, you have at times you have rivers that narrow, and then rivers that widen, and then they offshoot. But there's always a narrowing and a widening, and narrowing and widening. And a lot of the reason I believe that happens is because it actually creates pressure, which creates flow. And what I think are many of our churches and worship leaders. I mean, I talk about this regularly with worship leaders. I'm in a small church of 100, and even though that would be technically the top 10% of evangelical churches in the U.S. if you're over 100, but they think, oh, I don't have this, or I don't have this. I'm missing this element. I don't have a drummer. I don't have this. I don't have this. And the question is, well, okay, God has called you to disciple people and provide opportunities to pick up people's yes on the table. When they put their yes on the table, it's your job to create an environment or a ministry environment that picks that yes up. Um, and so maybe you need to create a system. I'll use myself as an example. So I'm also the worship leader at my local church here in Topeka, Kansas. We're a set up and tear down church that was launched in 2020. We're now right, perfect time to launch church, right in the middle of 2020. We set up and tear down in a school. Praise God, we're only doing that for 2 more Sundays till we move to a permanent home, which is amazing. Praise God for that. But we've done that for 6 years almost at this point. And so but what we try to strive for is the fact that we are missional minded and discipleship focused. So our goal is to be the engine, right, that doesn't slow down church planning. It doesn't slow down church growth. If we feel like God's calling and planning a church, we know statistically it's like 5 times more likely, or something. It's probably an overstatement. If they launch with a good pastor, a good lead pastor, and a worship leader, right? The statistical resilience of that church is astronomically higher. And so we want to be the engine that fuels that movement in the worship ministry. So we have initially I've been in this role since June. And we cut a handful of volunteer positions because we realized on the platform on Sunday, we were a mile wide and an inch deep. So we had one volunteer for every role. And when I stepped in, I'm like, that's just, that's not what our call is, right? Our call is to develop and disciple people. And we had people that just needed a platform. So we scaled down what we did, which actually fits our context, setting up and tearing down in a Christian school gym in Topeka. We have about, we're now up to over 400 people that are here on a Sunday, which is crazy. The Lord has been so kind to our church. But in the midst of that, we now intentionally narrowed the stream to focus on depth and pressure. That's what we talked about with the team. Like, we're going to actually, first season, we're going to narrow and we're going to limit the rules that we have on Sunday because we need to focus on depth. And that's where I think churches, small churches, mid-sized churches, they get stuck in that performative comparison, trying to do what the next guy does, right? And then as a result of that, they end up a mile wide and an inch deep, and then they burn out because if you have a keyboard player or not, or a drummer, or even there's some songs that just work better with a female leader. So if you have a service planned and your female leader's unavailable, you got to switch songs. You got to switch that. And it's that relentlessness that just wears on you. Because again, the weirdest thing, Sunday comes every 7 days. It's wild.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, as we're talking about coming into that and everything, Diana, I know you're having some connection issues, but if you are here right now, you said you started in your youth group. And so I'm curious, what was that like for you, kind of being called in from the ranks there, 12 years old, getting involved in that? That's not an uncommon story, but I'm just curious if you might be able to share a little bit of that. We may have unstable. There we go. You there, Diana?
Yeah, cutting in and out, so I'm hoping.
No worries.
I'm on my phone right now, so yeah, it is what it is. But just let me know if you can't hear me. Yeah, I started in my youth group, but I think for me, that we had like a youth band, and we were trying to they were trying to get more of the youth involved and stuff. But actually, what really did it for me was thank you. We had a I was at a church where we had a pastor. We had the Sunday morning worship team, and that was like all adults. And I grew up in a church where, I guess, I don't know if it's an official role, but it was kind of like kids weren't allowed to be on the adult worship team. And that was just kind of the way things were. And so when I was younger, I asked if I could join the team, and I have no idea why I wanted to. I just did. Like, there wasn't any I think, looking back, I think there can be I think there's two sides to the same coin, or there has to be a balance, because I would go to these churches where everything was so like, oh guys, it's not about me, less of me, more of Jesus, but like maybe in in an overly kind of religious sense versus in a genuine humility type of sense. And then there's the other place where it's I don't know, I would hear from these kind of more modern churches like, hey guys, you shouldn't want the platform, you shouldn't try to seek the platform. And at that point, I had been leading worship for a while, and I was confused genuinely, because I was like, well, I feel like when I go to church, I just have the biggest desire to help lead people into an encounter with Jesus the way that I've been touched and encountered, to where my whole life has been radically changed. I just want to share that with people. And so for me, it wasn't about trying to seek attention or trying to get validity or trying to get approval through a platform. I just genuinely wanted to share. And so I started getting confused, and even having a lot of shame around the concept of being on a platform. So I think there definitely has to be balance. But honestly, the biggest introduction into really starting to lead confidently was we had a Sunday evening service, and for whatever reason, like they had like one guy that was the worship team, and then he kind of slowly recruited a bunch of people to be a part of it. And so he recruited a bunch of the youth that like, you know, basically I like going to church, so I went to all the services, the morning services and the evening services, and he recruited me and my friend to start like, yeah, being background vocalists. And like, to be honest, it was kind of like those things where you give you know how like you give kids something to do to quote unquote help. They're not actually really helping, but you're giving them something to do to be useful. It was definitely, it started out more like that. I mean, I could sing, but it wasn't like we were really contributing something really awesome to the worship experience. But that was like a discipleship moment for me. So ever since then, I've been very passionate about getting young people involved in discipling them through the worship team, through the music and stuff like that. But I missed part of your question. I don't know if that was answers your question or not, but
No, that's great. Yeah, basically the main thing there is, you know, what are like how was that experience getting, you know, tapped on with the shoulder, you know, and I think that's beautiful, and I think you were contributing, maybe not in the way that you think you were trying to, but I think one of the joys that happens in any church is when they see the next generation getting involved in any capacity, either on the platform or not. Doesn't really matter. What matters is they see active discipleship happening in their
yeah,
congregation, and that lifts people's. It makes people's souls soar, and it challenges the other members of the church, asking them the question, "Hey, what are you doing? You know, like what are you doing with the next generation, with your kids or with other people's kids that you're volunteering to help out with?" And it does a lot of beautiful things, and it's worship. You know, it's not devoid of that. It is 100% authentic, beautiful worship.
yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like I think for me that was a big lesson in terms of like discipleship is activation. It's not teaching, if that makes sense. I think there's a time and place for teaching, but discipleship is about hands-on. I mean, Jesus did the same thing with the disciples. He's like, all right, now you guys go out and do all the ministry stuff and cast demons out and don't take purses and do all this stuff. So I very much see, but like I didn't grow up in a church that had that mentality or mindset. That the when I started on the worship team, that was a different church. But the church I had kind of grown up in was very much not like that at all. There was no kind of mentality around discipleship. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, if you have a musical talent, join the worship team, you know. But like it was very basic. It was we still at that point were only singing hymns and stuff. So, but you someone touched on something else, and now I'm drawing a blank. But oh, you know, in terms of like, I feel like the kind of the other part of like use discipleship with like worship teams and different things like that, especially when you talk about like burnout or like there's such a small pool of volunteers. I think it could be tricky if you're training someone and they don't have a lot of musical experience, to understand how to musically like I think like no matter how big or small your team is, I think you can make excellent music. Um, if you have a competent musician, I guess that would be the clause in that one. But I've been through enough ministry in different churches and different settings to where I am 110% like for advocating for like the health of a person, and not stretching someone too thin. And I'd rather us not have a drum player, even if I think drum playing is very vital for whatever the worship team, than to be overextending and stretching our one drum player and having them burn out and stuff like that. So I'm very much like I feel like that's kind of part of my philosophy and approach to where like I feel like no matter what size the team is, I think the health of the people inside of your team are more important. I think people like that. It's like people over results based ministry, because the people are the ministry, so to speak. And I think, yeah. So I mean, I think my friends and I talk about this like as worship leaders, and we talk about the idea of excellence isn't so much like, okay, are we hitting a certain measuring stick of what people tell us excellent in church production looks like? Rather, like, are we actually stewarding well and stewarding to the best of our abilities what we currently have in our hands? Because God can multiply that. Versus, like, are we hitting this standard of excellence that's been given to us, that's been set by, I don't know, let's just say elevation, and it has to be like, if we're failing that standard of excellence, then like, or like, what margin are we hitting this certain standard of excellence? And I don't think that's godly excellence. I just think that's results based excellence versus stewardship based excellence. So
Mm.
Mm,
That's great. Yeah, love that. Yeah. Anybody got any thoughts
good.
for Diana with that? I've got
Maybe
thoughts, but I don't want to speak first.
Same.
maybe I have one last thought here before I gotta jump to my plane. That's so inspiring to hear that. Like it feels like whoever put you in that situation at age 12 was doing the right thing and evaluating. It feels like the majority of places are over their skis, where the majority means 70% or 90%, but over their skis in the sense of like relying a little too much on how we're going to look or what's the production value versus how do we set this person in motion for their future and their calling. And I think that's balancing what can they do, what 1% can they do that's low risk, that if it failed, it's important to them, but in the big scheme of things, it's something that they can do and will be great for their future and setting them on a path. And and one of you were talking about, I think in general, man, I really want to come back to this conversation, but down the road, but like I think in general the meme would be we're trying to be professional and corporate culture is influencing us more than the contextual what are we called to do, me as an individual, to serve this individual, whatever God is doing in this community. And it's not going to be one size fits all. We're not all going to be Elevation. We're not all going to be the latest YouTube channel. It's all going to be different. And I come back to the bivocational, trivocational thing. How does a parent operate? You go, oh, I got two littles here, age 1 and 2. I'm going to sit here and sit on my butt and wait for someone to give me a job to be the full-time parent and shepherd to these two little ones. No. These little people need direction and love. And are you called to do this or not? Because if you are, get doing it. like you're not waiting for the paycheck. And this would be the extreme Kris talking now, the idealistic. What if right now we just said, no more pastors, no more worship leaders, no more worship bands are ever getting paid to do this, because we're going to ascertain what your calling is or not, and if you want to be here and do it, then do it. Now that would adjust all kinds of standards and level commitments, and hey, I got to be efficient, but really saying like this isn't a career. This isn't this don't if you're thinking about that, this is your career and your job, and you're going some places with your bank account by doing this. No, the first thing is, are you called to do this? And how are you pouring into others? And how are you serving? And if that is true, the Lord's going to make a way for you. And I just think that would really change a lot of things, and a lot of things that probably Shepherd staff is that what it is trying to solve, and what Kevin's trying to solve. If we change that language of like, what are you actually called to do as an individual? Are you in the wrong spot or not? Are you trying to force something up the hill that you shouldn't be putting your hand to? And how does that work in service to this local fellowship that you're called to shepherd and be a part of? I don't think it's an easy answer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Kris. And yeah, Kris, we really appreciate you hopping on this call as well, and wish you safe travels as you're
All right,
heading out
thanks.
to Utah and all that.
Yeah, great
Um,
to see you all, and maybe I'll catch you later.
absolutely. Hey, where can people follow you real quick if they want to connect?
Right now you could go, things are evolving a little bit, but you could find me at clashcreative.org.
Awesome. Thank you,
Okay.
Kris.
Yeah,
Appreciate you,
thanks.
brother.
Later, guys and gal. Bye.
All right. No, I echo Kris in so many ways on that too. I think it kind of leads into this next thing that I wanted to talk about within here with systems versus chaos, and this focus that I wanted us to have on leadership problems disguised as technical problems. One of those, and I think heart posture has a lot to do with that. What is your calling? Like, what are you supposed? What is your job as the worship leader or the pastor or the children's pastor, right? Whatever it is, what is your role and what has God called you to do? And then the question that I'd have to kind of kick this off would be what production problems are actually leadership and planning failures? So what production problems are actually a leadership and a planning failure versus maybe a spiritual failure or something that is not technical. It's more about you forgetting the focus of what you're supposed to be doing in that role. So what makes it a leadership problem versus a technical problem? And have you guys seen those with your people and seen them struggling with that?
That's a deep question.
I hope so. We got time.
You got my brain rattling on that.
Good. I'll let it sit in it for a minute. And maybe I'll say this while you guys are thinking on it and stewing on it. I would ask every one of my volunteers who I would interview to come in. I wouldn't do auditions. I thought auditions were making them struggle from the very beginning with excellence versus performance stuff. Amen. I didn't care if they were a 1 or a 10. And when it came to technical skill, I cared about where their heart posture was and if they had any skill. So if they had a level 1 skill out of 10, and I would invite them to jam sessions as we would rehearse. And I would put a guitar in their hand if they wanted to play guitar, and I would prepare them ahead of time. Here's some stuff. Here's some chord charts to get ahead of it. Here's some tracks to listen to. Come jam with us. And I would have my audio guy and one of my leaders in training listening to them in the back with headphones in the soundboard. And so they would be able to capture, hey, how are they technically? But what I'm really looking for is where's their heart? And if they were at a 1 or a 10, but they're going up, they have the ability to go up with their relationship with God or their relationship to their instrument, didn't matter what it was, then we could talk. But I would always promise them before they got started, I would say, God's clearly calling you to go in deeper in connection to his community here at this church. Before we get moving and before we hit the next step, I'm not going to promise you that it's here on the worship team. That might be it, but I don't know you, and you may have a great portfolio of what you've done in the past. I can't promise you it's going to be here, but what I can promise you is that I will get you to where he's called you to be in this church, whether it's in the children's ministry or if it's in the parking lot or wherever that is, coffee house, anything. And so if we agree on that, can we move forward? And then we would move forward. And that expectation up front was really helpful, I think, to get them in that mentality. But as a leader, my job was to make sure that nobody came in the fold who was going to drag us down spiritually. And it was to make sure that even if they're not 10 out of 10s, they're looking for God, they're hungry for God, and they can be discipled. And I don't care about the skill necessarily. That leads into a couple things I'll pose later, but yeah, just thoughts kind of on that leadership problems versus technical.
That's a great, just capture that and put that in a blog post titled "How to Never Say No to Anyone Because of Skill." Because that's a nervy, that's a nervy position, putting yourself out there and asking to be a part of a worship team. And Casey, I'm right there with you. I am pretty ardently against the concept of auditions or tryouts for the worship team. I think it's actually better, like Deanna said, to discipleship through, what'd she say, activation, right? I liked that phrase, right? I saw a thing, I don't know, a year or two ago. There was an example about leading versus demanding, right? And it was a guy standing at had another guy positioned across the room, and he said, okay, No, I want you to walk to me and count how many steps that took, right? Or I want you to walk 10 steps, right? And the guy took 10 steps and he got there. And he said, okay, now let's come back over here. And he goes and stands next to the guy and says, okay, so before we get started, tell me, as we get started, tell me a little bit about, tell me about your family. And the guy starts talking about his family, and he just starts, okay, the guy starts walking while other guy's talking about his family. Well, they go 10 steps and they actually go about 30% further. Right. And that was such a great example, I thought, of the whole concept of, especially for volunteers. I need to find that video and include that in a training at some point, because it is really valuable. It's just bring people in line, right? I mean, a great piece of wisdom I've clung to for years is hire the heart, train the skill. And I think that's where, the volunteer teams you see that struggle, or even the staff teams that you see struggle on the execution of Sunday and the balance of excellence as heart posture or excellence as performance. It all comes down. I mean, it all comes down to that heart issue. You look at the teams that, I think of small volunteer teams. One advantage or one fun thing is I get to experience a lot of different worship in a lot of different churches. And the one thing that I'll tell you is some of the most profound experiences that I've had as just an attendee of a worship service are actually not from some of the most musically excellent volunteer worship teams. It's actually from people that I can tell the congregation knows them. They know the congregation. The team knows each other. They love. I bet I could stop the middle of the service and say, ask the keyboardist, how are you praying for the organist right now? That they'd know, right? What's something you prayed for them in the and so it's that relationship. And I feel like I've run into this some that oftentimes there's some really musically excellent jerks that are leading worship teams because they that's what they know and that's what they care about. But meanwhile, no one, and this is where I see my role, like no one has come alongside them and said, yeah, but like, what about this? What about this? Or, hey, have you thought about this? Or like, maybe here's a reason to do, it's like a marathon pacer, right? Like no one's confusing me as a marathon runner or a pacer, quite frankly, but it's the, the role of that pacer is like, I've not trained to run 26 miles. I've trained to run 8, right? That's what I'm prepared, that's what I'm prepared to run. And what I'm prepared to run is 8 miles at a very specific pace that I know will best serve the person I'm running with. The person that I pay, like, so they come and run alongside and they help you maybe speed up, maybe slow down, maybe slightly adjust your cadence or your stride or offer a little bit of that. Meanwhile, just encouraging the crap out of you for what you've done so far. Right. And then at a certain point, they peel off like a fighter pilot and then they let you keep going. Right. And so I think that, a volunteer, just an easy trap to fall into is that, I've got to keep up with A, or I got to keep up with B, or I really like when people tell me I did a good job on Sunday, or they really or picking, even comes down to like picking a song, to the level of like repeating a song to the level of frequency, like even Sunday to Sunday, just because that's going to give you the dopamine hit of people saying like, gosh dang, you sounded good on that song. Right. I mean, those are easy traps to fall into, especially if everything around you gets challenging. Then you think, well, how do I get that dopamine hit and, or that feel good hit? That can reach a dangerous level. Sometimes that's maybe a cultural issue with the church, right? Or the staff or your pastor. Right. But I don't know if that directly answers your question, Casey. You've got me like thinking really hard on the leader versus oh man.
Oh, good. Here's what I'm going to do real quick. I've got a kid who needs my help real quick. So Greg and Kevin, I'm going to have you guys kind of take this this next one and just
Oh,
banter
great.
back.
Wheels off. Here we go.
And I know
Oh.
exactly. And
It might be dangerous, Casey.
no, this is gonna be fantastic. And so, Diana, I want you to jump in here as well, however you guys can. But the thing I'd like to hear, because I mean, Greg, I think when you pose the question, where would you love to see people rise in the ranks, or be recruited to a church from? And I think a lot of what Kevin was saying right there was important about people knowing who that person is and that relationship with them being something so important. But then also the building of that skill. Like, I mean, when it comes to the production side of it, the verses that we read up front were pretty clear in this mentality of pursuing, excellence for the Lord in everything that we do, in some way, shape, or form. And so you may not have, level 10 people in your church, but you may have a level 1 who needs to get to a level 3. And what are we training them on? Is it music? Is it leadership? Is it both? And how do we do that? How do we facilitate that? And I'd like you guys just to kind of talk about, let's say that you have churches who are looking to hire, and Greg, I'm just going to softball that one into you. So they're looking to hire somebody to take that role. What would you advise them to do first and why? And then I'd like to hear kind of the banter back and forth on that between how you can get them to pursuing excellence in their relationship with God first, their heart posture, but then in their skills as well and what they're doing. Does that work? Ball thrown in the...
Good.
It froze in the middle of your question. What I heard was, what would I advise a church in the hire or the person applying?
I mean, let's start with maybe the church, because the leadership, I think, needs to understand that, and I think that'd be a good thing to talk about. But then let's say that they say yes, and they do have a volunteer, and then if you guys continue on with it, what if they don't have a volunteer and you have to go outside? What are the dynamics there that help that successful transition there? We know that worship leaders are notorious for not sticking around very long, and I think that part of that might have to do with them not coming up from within, but then sometimes they can't. There is nobody there, and so it is just the karaoke stuff, and they're not really leadership or pastoral. They're just kind of a person leading a thing, and that's okay too. But yeah, anyways, there's a lot of webs that you can go out into that with, but maybe start with the church leadership and that conversation and that dynamic, and then if we can go into the actual leadership building side of it with either a volunteer or a foreign pastor coming in. All right, great. Go for it.
This may not be the track he wants, but one of the things we ask...
I got questions, Greg. Let's go.
One of the things we ask in this situation is you want somebody to come in and be your worship pastor. What are you wanting that is different than you already have? Because, and I'm sort of going back to a time when there were a pretty large number of churches who had more traditional worship forms and thought their growth edge would be getting into, I guess, what we call contemporary. I hate all the words that we use to talk about this.
Yeah.
And so they would bring that person in to be that change agent, and it almost always went poorly, and that's a leadership problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we get a little antsy if you want something different than you're already producing, and you're setting the specialist up for failure if you want too much change. So I would just say, first of all, think of change as being incremental over a fairly large amount of time, and that's really good change. I can't remember what else he asked about that. And, in worship pastor placements, I think they're among the diciest that we do in terms of, will this actually work? Part of that is what I would just call artist mindset, and CEO level pastors, that's sort of gas in a match. They just don't.
For sure. Yeah.
Mix. It's hard to understand artists sometimes. Sometimes they don't understand themselves.
Here's a question for you, Greg. I'd just love to hear your take on. I was gonna say, when it comes to worship leaders that, or roles, worship leader roles that you're trying to help facilitate connections with,
Yeah.
or placements with, when you look at the pool of candidates, however big or small that is, what are you seeing as the greatest areas of deficiency
Hmm.
in stepping into that? Like, is there a consistent theme of like, man, I've got, like, I think about pastoral placement, and
Yeah.
there's so many guys that are great preachers but are terrible pastors, right?
Yeah.
And like, I think that's a universalage, right? Of like,
Yeah.
it's like, too many. Yeah, right, for sure. So what are you, I'm just curious, what are you seeing with worship leaders?
Yeah, and I would say similarly, there are a lot of folks leading worship in churches who are enormously skilled and very good technically and look great on stage and have a beautiful voice. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a lot. What we run into when things fall apart is invariably one of two things. Either the senior pastor or boss connection, if that's a senior pastor or executive pastor, that breaks,
Hmm.
or what we find is that pastorally, in helping to lead a discipleship initiative for people who are involved in the arts in a church, that the person is not skilled at that kind of connection. They're way too much all about the actual production on Sunday and the ins and outs and logistics of, that's a lot of
Yeah.
logistics. And so what I find, and no offense if I've ever worked with anybody who's watching this who's been a candidate, I'm not thinking of any person when I say this. I think what a lot of worship folks miss is this whole idea of a big component of what you're doing is identifying others who you can develop. And if they ideally, if they could get their egos around, I'm going to work at this as if I am literally trying to replace myself.
Oh, 100%.
That would change the dynamic a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm we have some candidates who are getting a little older. They've crossed 45 and they're getting to 50 and don't look quite as good as maybe they once did.
Don't talk
One,
about mid-40s as
Well-
the threshold to the end times. I'm right there too. Don't do that. Yeah.
I'm way over that. But what I'm
Oh,
saying
gosh,
is
yeah.
when they're getting to where they need to settle into a church until retirement, they're getting into the
Yeah.
place where they want to be somewhere 5 years or more. And this needs to be my last post.
Yeah.
There's a set of those folks who've really pursued this more about themselves being good or themselves being sort of the one doing it. And they have a
Yeah.
much harder time at this juncture than the ones who've seen this as a development job, as a discipleship job, as raising up the next early enough to where, when they leave, they can be replaced internally, which is beautiful. But that's the component I see some people missing, that this is way, way more than producing a Sunday service and looking good doing it and having it sound amazing. There's 10, 20, 30 people in this little subset of the church who are engaging in something that, as we've already noticed or said, has the temptation always before them of it's about me or it's about what we're doing.
Yeah.
They're already in the zone where they're on
totally
stage with lights,
Yeah.
everyone thinking they're doing amazing, right? So I think a worship pastor would want to pay attention not only to increasing their own skill, but really pastoring this
Yeah.
group of people
Amen
who
to that.
are producing this part of the service.
I think best
Casey, I
piece of
have no
ministry
idea
advice
if we.
I've yeah.
I don't know if
Oh,
we talked
Casey, we
about what
took
you
it.
Keep
wanted
going.
us to.
You guys
We
keep
took
going.
it
I'm
where
catching
we
up on some
wanted to
other stuff.
go. We took it where we. Greg's out here dropping knowledge bombs left and right. We're talking about the
That's why I
greatest
just want to stay out of
deficiency
it.
of that he sees, or I guess one of the more consistent deficiencies he sees in potential worship leader pools of candidates, which is a bunch of people that are really talented and really skilled and love to lead, but they have no desire to make themselves as irrelevant as possible as fast as possible. And that was the best ministry advice I was given as a younger guy stepping into it. I mean, I came to vocational ministry a little later than, I think I was in my mid to late 20s when God really prompted and opened those doors for me. But my mentor, who's my boss now, when I asked him, I was like, well, how do I measure success? Right. I came from corporate world. I came from advertising, my degrees in advertising. I came from that kind of very strategic creativity role in a lot of corporate or more business oriented environments. So I asked him, I was like, what does success look like? And what he said, I'll never forget. He said, make yourself as irrelevant as possible, as fast as possible. Right.
Amen.
Like we need less pop stars. We need more proud mama and papas. Because like part of my call in my journey in ministry to the position I'm at right now, Greg, you probably experienced, Casey, I know you've experienced this too, is when God, without your knowledge, you don't even know what's happening. You start noticing the team you're developing, and you start standing back on a Sunday morning while you're like just function as the band director thinking, gosh dang, how far have they come? Like 2 years ago, Casey would have never thought they would have done that. And God spent like 7 months doing that on my heart, and I didn't even realize it. But what that was doing, he was molding and shaping me into that proud mama and papa, right? That papa bear mentality, where suddenly when he removed the thing when God asked me to sacrifice the thing that I felt like more called and equipped to do than anything in my life, which was be a vocalist and lead from the platform on a Sunday in worship, through song, right? God was going to ask me to give that up to come to this new season where I was spending a lot more time having lunches than I was singing on platforms. And what I didn't realize was that he was molding my heart over 8 months, to where I actually realized oh, that means I do less planning, right? Like I live less in the grind, and I actually get to just champion and encourage. And again, get to know people, ask them questions, ask them, pour into them, pastor them, love them, mentor them, walk alongside them. It's why we talk about rehearsals are so, I'm a big supporter of midweek rehearsals, because at least in the 15 plus years that I've been doing ministry, the deepest, most profound ministry or pastoral opportunities God put in my path happened before or after Wednesday night rehearsals. They just have. Outside a spontaneous life event, like my parent just passed away or my spouse just got a diagnosis. Outside of that, the opportunities God opened up, he opened up more opportunities before or after Wednesday night rehearsal than ever. And that's where I totally get what you're saying. And I agree 100%, Greg. I think that's both hilarious and sad that you answered the exact same way that if you had asked me that question, what is the single greatest deficiency? We don't have enough people that want to train themselves out of a job.
Yeah. And
right?
I get it. And no judgment, not blaming you, worship pastors, to resist making oneself as irrelevant as possible as soon as possible is just very human. That's
for sure.
That is the way the world systems work. The only issue with that is that we can do better. We have the tools of our faith training. We have almost anything Jesus ever said. And we have the Spirit enabling us to counterintuitively approach what is very natural. What's very natural is to not make oneself irrelevant. Heavens, Jesus was, and I didn't come to, I'm not a preacher at all, but he You don't have to look for secret hidden messages within Jesus's words to see him constantly talking about this servant whose last shall be first. I mean, that's fairly plain, right? So
Yeah.
it's quite worldly and natural and human to resist that, but it's wrong. And
Yeah.
so we have all the tools to be able to resist that.
It's the upside down. Yeah. It's just, his ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts. And so, I mean, when it comes, I loved when I would throw out an application to other churches, the way that I would write my cover letter would be, I'm probably not the guy who you're looking for. I just throw that out there, probably up front. Say, I'm not a front person. I'm a person who, at the end of a couple years, I want to be up on the stage maybe twice a month because other people are leading. And that's where I want to be. I want to be with the people, developing leaders and teams. I don't really want to be the front guy on the stage. I like to share that. And what was nice was it really got rid of a lot of churches I didn't want to lead with, and participate with, because they were looking for a lead person to just take that role. And, for whatever reason, that's okay. But I knew what I wanted to do, what I'm called to do. And discipleship was the thing, and replication and working myself out of a job as quickly as possible was the thing. And you'll find yourself in the upside down kingdom. When you make yourself replaceable, you become irreplaceable to the people that you're working for. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not replaced in the position that you made yourself replaceable with, but they want to keep you around because they're like, wow, this guy is helping us grow, or this gal is helping us grow. I mean, they're making it happen here, and we need more of that. And if they don't like that, then at least you did a good job training and discipling new people. But maybe that's not where you should be permanently. Because if we're trying to follow Jesus' example, it was follow me, and then it was this back and forth of challenge and invitation. And it was just a back and forth of that, wherever they were at, and helping them grow. And Peter's probably the greatest example of this we see Peter being challenged all the time, but probably the greatest example that I can think of would be when he said, Peter, I'm going to build my church on you. You're the rock, I'm going to build my church on. What an invitation at Peter or with Peter at that moment. And it's like just a few verses later, get behind me, Satan. It's just this total challenge and shock of you're elevated. I'm elevating you to this position. Now get behind me because you're acting like Satan and you're keeping me from doing what my Father wants me to do. And the challenge becomes greater when the invitation becomes stronger. And walking him through that was such a beautiful thing that you see throughout Peter's journey with Jesus. And if we can replicate that, that should never stop. We're always supposed to be who's on deck, who am I discipling next? And if a church doesn't want you to do that, they'd rather have you just be the guy up front and the person, then there's probably something deeper going on that they need to either experience through you, and that's why God's called you there, to help them understand a more biblical way of doing leadership. And you should just pray that God would help use you to fertilize that ground. Or they're just not ready for that type of a ministry, and they need to be challenged on that. Because they've already been invited to lead God's people. Now they need to be challenged for what that really means. And sometimes God uses you to do that. And so, I don't know, there's a lot of cool stuff. I want to get Diana in here for a second, though. Diana, you've been doing this in kind of different creative ways, and I know your journey has been a little less than straight when it comes to leading worship and stuff. You've done the singer-songwriter thing, you do education, bivocational, and all of that stuff. When you hear us talking about this kind of stuff, replication, discipleship, instead of just making Sunday happen, does that cause any anxiety for you, or what were your thoughts with all of that?
Oh no, I'm 110% in agreement. I haven't had I'll say a staff position at a church in a while. So I've been kind of floating around the last couple of years. And I haven't necessarily, I've been wanting to kind of have something more consistent. Uh, Honestly, just because I love being able to pour into and disciple. And when I'm coming as a guest for a day or for a week or a couple months, like I don't have that empowerment or authority to be able to do that, if that makes sense. Like you can do it in small ways, like, texting my team and just like checking on them weekly and just like seeing how I can pray for them. But other than that, I'm not really empowered by the church leadership to do a whole lot more than that. And that's honestly me taking it on myself. So it's interesting though, from the outside perspective. My biggest kind of wish is that in general, like when you guys talk about like worship leaders not sitting around for very long, like I tend to be a pretty loyal person, and I don't really move unless the door closes on me, if that makes sense, or unless I really feel like God's like, all right, you got to move, if that makes sense. And I usually will stay around a lot longer once I start really initially feeling like I need to move, because I want to make sure like I'm not leaving because someone hurt me and I'm offended or whatever. So like I'm pretty cautious about just like I want to be able to leave for the right reasons in the right places, even if I'm literally just like a hired helper, so to speak. Just like I'm there to serve, like by playing a guitar, whatever happens to be. But my biggest wish is literally, I think a lot of times the leadership is like a top down type of thing. So a lot of times if you're trying to lead, and I'm 100% with like raising up other people, but you don't have the support from the leadership above you, the people that are really like setting the cultural standards for the church, it's really like there's only so much you can do. So that's just like a huge thing from my perspective, where I'm coming in and I have almost kind of no empowerment really to do a whole lot other than like the music portion of things. And I think that's again a leadership issue and a cultural issue from the top down. And sometimes you can really help enhance things while you're there, but you're still kind of limited and capped to the leadership that is above you, especially when they do just treat you like, oh, you're just there to help us get our worship team goal accomplished. And obviously they'll tell you, oh no, we care about presence over performance, we care about all these other things, but then their actions kind of say otherwise, because they're not invested into you, even if they are stipending you to be there or whatever as a musician and stuff. So that's kind of one thing. The other thing is like I kind of wanted to share this, just kind of this touches on the question you had just asked, and then kind of the thing you were talking about before. But there was a church that I was traveling a lot and just kind of going from city to city, just kind of wherever the Lord was leading me to go. And I landed in Seattle for a little bit, and I ended up getting connected to this ministry, and it was like a church plant in like the heart of Seattle, like Pioneer Square, and they didn't want to start a church, but they started one because they do like a lot of homeless outreach ministry, like ministering to like drug addicts, ministering to just homeless people. Yeah. Give me 2 seconds. Sorry. I'm just picking something up right now. So yeah, and so basically they crap. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, you're good.
Um, yeah, so like I went there, and they obviously like they had like, I'll call it a ragtag team, not even like a motley crew. Like they had one guy that like plays in the ska band like part time, and he works full time in like whatever, like data type of analyst stuff. And he's a decent musician. He's like an okay singer. And give me some. So sorry. Yeah, and the rest of the team, like I could tell he was trying to train them up, and he was trying to teach them how to like hold a beat on a cajon. And I was just like watching, like cringing. I'm like, oh my god, this is so bad. And half the population was like some like really hardcore, like committed Christians, and the other half of the population were like people that were trying to.
I muted myself. I thought I muted her. Diana,
Oh,
I
I was
think.
gonna say,
Dan, I think we lost you there for a second. Let's go ahead and just get back to that story when you're back. But for now, Kevin, did you have something that you were gonna kind of speak into there that I cut you off on, or
Oh no, keep going on your rundown. We'll have more to talk about, I'm sure.
keep going? Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. So what I'd like to do here is just kind of open this up for any thoughts when it comes to what I said at the beginning about production. Is it stealing the show? And I think the heart of that really, that question is really behind what are our motivations for Sunday morning as leaders in the church, and our motivations filled with producing the excellence, and is that what we? I guess the best way to say this is Monday morning, if I'm meeting with my leadership team to go over how Sunday went, what are my questions and what's my scoreboard, that scorecard, and what are the wins that we're going to put up there, and what are the losses that we're going to put up there, or the things we need to work on. And so I guess when we're asking the question, is production stealing the show? What do you guys think should be on that scorecard, and how do we keep our hearts from maybe allowing the pursuit of excellence to steal the pursuit of God in those moments?
well, I think one thing that does need to be looked at, even though it's right on the line of what we're talking about here, is I think there is a place for, hey, basically, did everything go smoothly? Were there any places where the service all but shut down because somebody wasn't in place? I mean, those are logistical things, but I think that kind of thing you can go too far with, but I think that does need to be looked at, because those are also easy fixes. And if you think in terms of just creating an environment that works, those kinds of things aren't what you are trying to create. So there, I think you have to put that on the scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
When you said this about the scorecard, I totally agreed with you. And then when you said, what are the things we would put on the scorecard? Mine went completely blank. Like, I think you're exactly right. And I'm not sure what to specifically say ought to be on that card.
That's great.
Yeah, Greg, I totally, sometimes the best thing that we can do is just minimize distraction.
Yeah.
Right. And eliminate that. So it's, it's funny, especially people that are, I love the running joke of like, never underestimate just how little your congregation notices on a Sunday morning. Right. And but it's one of those, so sometimes like we chase production, or we think about that and we think service flow, but we're actually missing the most impactful things. Like you might do some crazy, stacked, stack set of actions running 3 different things to do this like transition or something like that, all launched out of MIDI triggering across like 5 or 6 different computers and all that sort of stuff. But you know what will impact your service in a more helpful way was the person that came up to pray at the end. Did they wait until the song completely ended, or did they or did you have you put in some sort of trigger or cue system or something, some sort of system in place so they know when to come up, right? Because that impacts your flow. Right. And that's universal, whether you're big church or little church. Good service flow is good service flow, right? So I think about for a lot of our small to medium sized churches, they, they're not thinking about, well, what did I use the right mixture in the hazer, right? They're not thinking about that. But you know what? You could buy, if nothing else, you could probably buy 3 or 4 minutes of extra service time, whether that's finishing more at a more respectful time, if you consistently are, if your team are consistently running over due to poor planning or poor execution, there's so much time to be found in those transition points. Or I know a good Casey, a litmus test that it's kind of funny because it's become one of those things. If I ask in like a breakout about worship, if I've got a room of worship leaders, it's probably the one question I've learned that I've asked in the last few years, that like everyone you see them go, ooh, like it was all kind of a gut check, which is, if you have a midweek rehearsal, when your people arrive, are you ready to receive them? Or are you still running around finishing stuff?
That's good.
And so I was trying to pull up real quick, because
You got a
I
link,
think
throw it in.
evaluate,
I can pull it up.
yeah, it's evaluating worship is such a vital part of it here. Hold on, y'all talk amongst yourselves. Let me find it.
No, that's good. No, and Greg, I appreciate you saying that as well, because yeah, the value of not, man, I think I'm going to have a couple guys on at the church that I was with, which is like a 3,000 to 5,000 person church, and production is a machine for that church. And so the battle for them was very different than the small church that I would have led, where production is something you can't really achieve,
Right.
It's a different heart posture that you're struggling with at that point, where with a small church, it's how do I not pursue production so much, where with because it's not even necessary, right? Like they need to know who I am and they're going to have a great time worshiping here with me in the room. Where when you're serving 5,000 people, it's a different question. It becomes more of, how do we not take people's eyes off of the Lord when they're here, because their expectations are different and the culture is completely different with that mentality. It's more based on people doing the thing on Sunday. So how do we get them in little groups with each other, and how do we facilitate that? And there's a lot of pieces behind that machine. And I hate using that word, but it really is what it is. If it's flowing well, and machines aren't a bad thing, right? Like it's not a bad thing to be part of that. And so the way that, and I'll let the guys, when we talk about this another time and all of that, but one of the greatest values for me, somebody who thinks haze is probably not one of the best things to focus on, when it comes to church, and is it there, is it not there, to create a Holy Spirit atmosphere. Lighting is not my biggest thing that I care about. The quality of audio is, for a lot of reasons, but at the same time, like, for me to be in a room with all these people and see that the end result for them was, how do we create a distraction-free environment for people to pursue their relationship with God and the relationship with each other. And they actually held to that standard, where they discipled the kids and the youth and the adults who were in their respective areas of cameras and lighting and audio, to have that heart posture going in, even if they were doing a live stream. And so for the live stream, it's, how do I love the people online who are at home, shut-ins, or traveling around and can't get here? How do I keep them in my focus and not the person who's just jumping churches and shopping around? And where is my mentality grounded and my heart grounded, so that I can do my absolute best to knock it out of the park for those people, because I love them and because I love the Lord and I want him to be shared with them in a clear way. And so raising the bar in excellence became a pursuit of, how do I love God and love people, and not this idea of just trying to raise the bar for production's sake. And that would have to do with minimizing distraction. That would have to do with making sure kids didn't get lost, on a Sunday. Like all of those things were kind of weighed in that the same frame of mind, to pursue excellence, loving God, loving people. How do we facilitate that? And so, yeah, I guess on the scorecard, if we were to say, hey, one of the kids got lost on Sunday, in the shuffle of transitioning between services, which I was there when one of those things happened. It's one of the worst feelings in the world when you got an entire staff trying to hunt a kid down, especially when you hear that their divorced dad might have been the one who made that happen, through that process. And so you're in all sorts of, panic mode for the mom and for the kid at that point. And when on Monday, the way that it's brought up as a problem is brought up of this rejoicing effort of how much the people loved on the mom throughout that experience. and what was the takeaway that was kingdom focused? What's the king? And they would always say, what's our kingdom win for this week? What's the kingdom win? I think that very little shift of mentality was like, I can take almost anything production wise, and it's just reorienting my head to say, this was a kingdom win, not just a win. And this is why. And then there's the idea of, okay, well, if this wasn't a kingdom win, how is this? And they would always use this term, an EBI. And I carry this into my cohorts with the win week stuff, Kevin. But EBI, even better if. And so this was a problem. We lost a kid. That's a big problem. How could it be even better if we didn't do that? Like, what's my solution to that problem? And how does that make it a kingdom thing in the future that would glorify God? And so, yeah, that simple realignment was something that I love that they did at that church. But as we kind of get to the end here on all of that, what I'd like to do, man, we need to talk about this for more hours, guys. This is way too short of a time to have these discussions. Let me ask you this. If we were to have another call at some point, or to have more people come on, what are a couple questions that you would like us to go over? Maybe just a topic that we can just unite around and start chomping on.
Why off-platform matters more than on-platform.
Okay. How about you, Greg? What do you feel like's been left out here that we need to still get into here?
Well, I mentioned, the reason things don't work out sometimes is the relationship with, usually it's a senior pastor, but whoever is really in charge of that person. So I think something to explore is how that can be managed better, or just be better. I think there's something there are some things a worship pastor can do, whether the senior pastor is in or out of touch, micromanager, leave you alone, whatever. But we just see that go wrong sometimes. And
Yeah.
Relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships when it comes to, give me a specific there you'd like to talk about, because I think that's awesome. But so I can
Pastor, worship pastor relationship.
Yeah.
Managing that.
Yeah. Being a second chair leader is weird sometimes.
Yeah. Who has who has shares that stage.
That's really good. I think that's what Diana was kind of speaking to as well. That's one I heard her talking about. I remember going to, and I know I got to close this down. I remember going to this conference that this church was holding for worship leaders, and one of the segments that they had was the relationship between the pastor and the worship pastor. And I remembered when I went there, we were in transition from my old church that I was going from. Their pastor had changed, and they got in a new guy, and there was absolutely no relationship between me and him. And it was one of the things where when I came back, I was like, man, I know that I've been, because that was my first time being stretched as a worship leader to do a lot more organization, a lot more production as far as keeping the wheel going. I had 5 leaders that I was developing. I had 4 teams that I was managing. And so I was developing all these systems and such. And I got distracted from that relationship with my my teaching pastor. And we met every week, but I got distracted from why aren't we going out and just hanging out once a week, just getting some coffee and not focusing on Sunday? Why aren't we building some kind of meaningful relationship here? And man, I'd love to dig into that, because we are the two people that people look at the very most every single week together.
Right.
Be unified in the decisions of why we did something on Sunday. But if our hearts aren't aligned, we need to figure that out. And it turns out our hearts were really not aligned in a lot of ways. And that was okay. And we parted ways eventually. But it was really because coming back, I realized, wow, that's something that I need to pay attention to. And it's a good thing that we started to pay attention to it, because, misalignment is sometimes it's a thing. I mean, you got Paul and you got his disciples with Timothy that were like, there was great alignment there, but not everybody was super aligned with Paul. And doesn't mean they didn't care for each other or didn't respect each other, but they didn't work well together. And that's okay. Barnabas wasn't the greatest with him. So, yeah. But anyways, what I'd like to do tonight, let's just shut this down, and we'll get on another one at some point. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about platform on stage versus off stage, why it's important for that. I think those are two huge ones that we can go over. But before we get off, can Kevin, you just give a quick, where can people follow you if they want to connect with you over stuff? And then Greg, can you do the same? And then we'll just pray this out.
Yeah, probably the two places is the first one is Church Forward Worship on like social media, Instagram, things like that. That's the Church Forward Worship Collective, which is something that we launched October of last year, and continue to do some training and educating and work hard, fun hard. So we try to do all of those over there. And then personally, you can find me on pretty much everywhere on any social media platform is See Kevin Go, like C Spot Run, SEE Kevin Go. So look for me there, and you can find me there.
Awesome. Not to segue, Kevin, I wrote a song called C Spot Run back in the day.
Nice. That seemed like a really good idea when I was doing photography full time. That like See Kevin Go, because it was involving like expanding to travel and some like adventure lifestyle kind of photography. I have to spell that for every person. My email is Kevin at See Kevin Go, and like everyone's like, oh, like, or they read it and they say, oh, it's Seek Avingo. It's like, nope, See Kevin Go, like C Spot Run.
Kevin Go.
I've regretted it. I've regretted it ever since I leaned into it hard. So
love it. All right, Greg, where can people find you, man?
Not on social media. So you can't find me there, but shepherd.group takes you to our website where all my information is, including you can email me through there. My phone number's probably on there. I'd love to hear from anyone anytime.
Awesome. Diana, are you with us?
Yes, finally.
Beautiful.
It's been a rough
I'm so
day.
sorry you had trouble with this one today. But where
No,
can
it's
people
okay.
find you if they want to ask you? Oh, we may still be having trouble. That's okay. Thanks. Get going a little bit later. But yeah, thanks, guys. Let me go ahead and just praise out.
Can you hear me
After
now?
that, then we'll just hang out for a minute and close out. So let me just pray for us. Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you for today. Thank you so much for Kevin, for Greg, for Diana, for Chris, and just this community that we're trying to build here. People who are just asking the question, what are we doing for you every day? And how can we place you at the highest every day? And Father, I thank you for the callings that you've given each of us. I thank you for the trust that you've given us to share your gospel, to share your love with people that you've put in our path. And I pray that we would just be yay sayers, that we would just say yes whenever we feel like you're prompting us to do something. Father, I pray that you would just bless Kevin and his ministry with all of his churches that he oversees. I pray that you would bless Greg with all of the facilitation he does with gathering people to lead, and his relationship with those people that he's fostering to go into leadership positions, as well as the churches that he's helping facilitate that with as well. I pray that you would go before him with all of those relationships and just make them grounded in loving you and loving your people. And then I pray for Diana as well, that you would just be with her as she is pursuing so many things for you, from education, from having relationships with kids and developing their musical skills and abilities, to leading worship wherever you call her, and writing music to just love you and share with your people. And so I pray you would just bless her for that. Father, may you go before us in everything that we do and everything that we say. May you bless the works that we do in a mighty way for you. And may you just help us to keep our eyes focused on you and our hearts warm to hear your word and to be following every step that you want us to take. So we love you. We pray us all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah.